50 lawmakers from the House of Representatives have written to the president asking him to release Nnamdi Kanu. Good morning and welcome to the Dailies, where we keep you up to date with the happenings. Wherever you are, I believe that most part of the country is raining, so please do try and keep yourself warm so that you do not fall ill. I am Tada Elisha Dasham, and I will be doing the program alongside Rachel Dazi. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning,
How
Sally.
you doing?
I'm fine, and you?
Great. How's the weather, the rain?
Sally, I'm cold. I had a tough morning this
Oh,
morning, but I'm
sorry.
okay.
Yeah. But we'll pass it. I mean, it's the time of that is that time
Yes,
of the year
yes.
actually. Well, remember you can actually drop your comment, your views on our Facebook and also on YouTube. We shall go through the papers, starting with the Matrix newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, the big story, Dangote cries out as refinery survival is threatened. It seems IOC's objective is to ensure that our petroleum refinery fails, blames NMDPRA of granting licenses indiscriminately to marketers to import dirty fuel, applauds NUPRC for trying best to allocate crude to it. You can find details on page 2. First commercial gold transaction injects $5 million into economy, says Minister of Solid Minerals Development. You can start with the details on the front page. Euro 2024, Germany escapes Swiss defeat as Hungary sends Scotland home. You can find details on page 16. Mounting 121.67 trillion naira debt, Serap Kicks says World Bank loans fail to impact Nigerians. Rivers crisis, organized labor shelves planned protests over police presence at LG Secretariat. On Hajj 2024, Saudi authorities put death toll at 1,301 as Bago call for review of Nakan. You can find details on page 3. Still on the paper, Christ Embassy fire outbreak. Pastor Yakilome vows to build bigger and better church. On Nnamdi Kanu's case, 50 reps members right Tinubu demand his release. NAF launches airstrike, destroys illegal oil sites in Rivers and Bayelsa, and Imo. Details can be found on page 4. And regarding the story concerning the first commercial gold transaction, we have a picture story where we can see the president, the Minister of Mineral Resources, says National Gold Purchase Program debuts. And you can find details inside the paper on page 8. And the last story, through church activities, I realized my potential, a statement from Justice Ben Young. Details can be found on page 14, and that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, NLC kick against decentralization of minimum wage negotiation, which is part of the stories that was going through the weekend, where we saw Governor Fabemi saying the fact that, you know what, not all states are equal, therefore there should be a decentralization. We're saying that Labour is insisting on centralization, that is to say every state pay the same minimum wage. So you can do well to follow up that story in the paper. 50 lawmakers write Tinubu seek Nnamdi Kanu's release, with the writer says IPOB leader release will aid restoration of peace in the southeast. Kanu's freedom will enhance Tinubu administration legacy as one that prioritizes national unity, peace and progress. More detail found in the paper. And on the gold program, Tinubu hails $5 million boost to foreign reserve as a major milestone in Renew Hope agenda. Federal government committed to effective border control, staff welfare coming from the immigration CG. And we have the Nigerian Air Force airstrike destroys 13 illegal oil refining sites and 7 boats. And concerning the ASU strike, NAS appealed to lecturers and federal government to shift ground. We remember that the non-academic staff, as well as even the senior staff association of the university, are saying that because of their arrears, they will go on strike. And we're seeing that it seems ASU as well will join in that strike if their arrears is not being paid. And here we're seeing that the National Association of the Nigerian Students are appealing to lecturers to please shift ground. So we hope that they will actually listen to the voice of the students. More detail found on page 9. NDLEA boosts snake guarded shrine used to store illicit drugs, arrests 2 in Edo State. And we have the picture story showing us the Lagos State Fire Rescue Service during where they're trying to put off the fire at the Christ Embassy Church that caught fire yesterday. And that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
Daily Independent, the big story, CBN year-end 21.4% inflation mark unrealistic, may hit 40%. This is an analysis from experts says skyrocketing food inflation may crash economy soon. Asks fiscal authority to be proactive over high food prices. Reps right Tinubu demand release of Nnamdi Kanu. You can start with the details on the front page. Western Delta University assures on arresting robbers who terrorized students. Tinubu seeks refund from civil servants drawing salaries after relocating abroad. NNPC set to deliver gas revolution with OB3 gas pipeline project. Federal government sees national gold purchase program boosting reserves and naira value. 121.67 trillion naira debt. Serap asks World Bank panel to probe loan advances to federal government and state. NDLEA raids snake-guarded shrine used to store illicit drugs. Details of that story can be found on page 6. On Rivers crisis, ex-LG chairman and battle lawmakers planning mayhem outdone once. Details can be found on page 6. Zamfara moves to swell number of non-viable airports in Nigeria. State governments building beyond their capacity. You can start with the details on the front page. How international oil coils are sabotaging us. This is a complaint from Dangote Refinery. Details can be found on page 7. And that's all the news on Daily Independent newspaper.
On Daily News Hub newspaper, Yoruba Party to field candidates in UK elections, detailed in the paper. The big story, IUC plotting to cripple our rep operation, Dangote Refinery cries out. IUC plotting to cripple our operations, Dangote Refinery cries out. Accuser I, the NMDPRA of complicity in importation of dirty diesel and jet fuel. President orders sanction of civil servants taking salary after relocating abroad, and he have said that for those who are still collecting salary, they have to actually refund the money, as well as if their bosses are aware, they will also have to face a penalty for that. And he said this on Saturday after the rounding up of the civil service week which started. So you can do well to look more into what the president has to say concerning those who actually are still taking salaries after relocating abroad. Tinubu celebrates as Nigeria sell gold, inject $5 million into the economy. Why Ogun created Mineral Resources Agency coming from the governor's aid. All SIM cards, all SIM cards used in Nigeria locally are manufactured, coming from NCC. All SIM cards used in Nigeria locally manufactured. More detail found in the paper. Ojude Oba poster boy Arigbe breaks silent on body tattoo, says I have had them for longer. We will recall during the festival there were two people who were actually on the front page that's talking about the Ojude Oba as well as others, when he was saying that the tattoo is showing that he has been living with cancer for a period of time and he still have cancer. So if you want to know more about him, you can do well to read that in the paper. Here we are having Davido shares pre-wedding photos for those who have been following the entertainment industry. NDLEA discovers snake-guarded shrine used to store illicit drugs. Nigeria lost nation in Group A of FIFA Under-17 Women World Cup draw. And on Sunday morning in funeral, we have Christ Embassy will bounce back bigger and better, coming from Pastor Oyekilomi. You can find that in the paper. Suspected cultist gone down top banker in Edo State. That's a sad one. You can do well to read more of that. And that's all on Daily News Hub newspaper.
On First News newspaper, in a letter to Tinubu, 50 reps member asks for Nnamdi Kanu's release. Tinubu calls for STEM action against civil servants receiving salaries after traveling abroad. And then we've been seeing this story on most of our paper. My question is, who has been paying them? There is, every paycheck, every payroll have to be approved and signed. And you have a worker that has relocated, is no longer working under you, is working elsewhere, and you're still approving his payment. and said that there is so much corruption in the civil service. They are one of the reasons that the employment environment of Nigeria have become so corrupt
Very true.
to a level that makes life really unbearable for everybody. Because as far as I'm concerned, this person is now a ghost worker if you're paying him. And you wonder, what is the agreement did they have? Oh yeah, take 30% and I'll pay you the remaining, because that's the
Very
only thing
true.
that makes
Very
sense.
true. Very
Because why
true.
are you still paying someone who no longer works with you? This is corruption to the highest level, and this is where we can't point fingers at the Nigerian government, because it's not in the president, it's not the president that's in that office, it's not the Senate president that is in that parastatal or government and agency or ministry. These are civilians, everyday men and women moving, going to the market, complaining about the government, and yet in your office there's just nothing but too much corruption. So every time we talk about we are a reflection of our leader, it is a fact, because there's just a replica of what we do at our level at the top. So I just hope that we something is being done drastically about this, and we don't see such
Honestly,
appearing
Rachel,
news.
you really just, you hit the bull at the eye rightly concerning things like that, because definitely there must be negotiation between the bosses and the people relocating.
Yeah.
And of what excuse would you give that you're out of the country? And this has been going on for a long period of time. And
Yes.
even me, Rachel, you'll be surprised that people who relocated for the past 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years are still earning salary in Nigeria.
It's sad.
So I'm happy that the president have actually seen this and he's talking about it. I hope that he follow up as well to the various agency MDAs, and then to check those who are not on their duty posts and are still earning from the Nigerian government.
Still on First News, Peter Obi applauds Tinubu for emulating borehole project initiative. NDLEA unearthed snake-guarded shrine storing illicit drugs in Edo. National challenges, stakeholders unite in forceful call for regionalism revival. NAV destroys starting illegal refining site, 7 boats in rivers operation. The big story, Tinubu's effort insufficient, Nigerians are hungry. A statement from Oji Kalu advocates for 90,000 naira minimum wage. Nance Naptan urged federal government unions to avert university shutdown amid impending strikes. SEC foresee $2.6 trillion boom in sustainable finance, urges investors to seize green opportunity. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, 121.67 trillion naira debt to review all debt hold federal government accountable for corruption, Serap tells the World Bank panel. You can find more detail of that in the paper. We have achieved 100% local production of SIM card coming from the NCC. Nigeria makes $5 million revenue from gold sale coming from Alake. And on fire outbreak, we will build a bigger and a better church coming from Pastor Chris Ayekilumi. NDLEA raids snake-guarded shrine storing illicit drugs, arrests 2 in Edo State. And here we're seeing the war against cholera that has been going on for a long period of time. Vaccine shortages, poor hygiene worsen epidemic in Nigeria. Expert warn of looming public health emergency, call for improved hygiene practices. As street food vendors put consumers at risk. And then on Lassa fever, diagnosis and prompt treatment essential coming from the World Health Organization. We can see picture story of some children drinking polluted water, and that can be the reason why we are having the issue of cholera. So we hope that the needed agency, bodies and organization will actually take note and do something about the safe drinking water. Dangote accuses IOC NMDPRA of plotting failure of $19 billion petrochemicals refinery. More detail found on page 4, and that's all on Nigerian News Direct.
On this day newspaper, the big story: Dangote refinery, IOC's plotting our failure by declining to sell local crude despite paying premium. Calls on federal government, National Assembly to protect Nigeria's interests. The granting of import license by NMDPRA despite ban on dirty fuel. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 8. Alake presents gold bars to Tinubu, says mining sector will boost Naira value. You can find details inside the paper, and that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, derivation oil producing states share up to 102% to 505.8 billion naira data found in the paper. NIBSS appoint leaders for Afrigo Pay to drive Nigerians card scheme. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, IOC manipulating crude oil price, Dangote alleges. And on the issue of the presidential jet, Tinubu's proposed 400 borehole project preferable, coming from Peter Obi. And from the ex-AG, local government not federating unit shouldn't be in constitution. Northern lawmakers orders demand Nnamdi Kanu's release. You can find that as well on page 25. And on COT, bank customers lament frivolous deduction and sharp practices, as experts say Nigerian financial system worrisome. It's not done in sinner claims, says ex-CBN manager. You can find more detail of that on page 2. We are yet to establish major cause of cholera outbreak, coming from the Lagos state government. And we have begging at airports ruin country's image, coming from the minister NSA. 1 year after Tinubu's campaigners still awaiting reward. Nasarawa Palace Kanu governor issue quit notice to Bayero. You can find that on page 26. Nigeria on verge of bankruptcy, coming from Akiyemi, says protests in Kenya warning to Nigerian leaders. 121.67 trillion naira debt, World Bank loan failed to impact Nigerians, coming from Syrup. More detail found on page 5 and 28. And on minimum wage, NLC kick again decentralization of negotiation, with the rider ASUFRIT over Tinubu's failure to remove institution from IPPIS. And we have a study that says walking brings benefit for low back pain. So it's very important that you take a walk once in a while. Abandon your car and just take a walk so you can stay healthy. This is a study you can find on page 27. Now we still have the picture story here. Federal government sell the local refined gold to CBN, say transaction earned Nigeria $5 million. You can read more detail of any other story that is of interest to you in the paper.
On Daily Sun newspaper, Dangote accuses IOCs of planning to sabotage refinery operations, says issuance of import license by NMDPRA threat to investment. Details can be found on page 21. The big story on the paper, Tinubu goes after civil servants earning salaries without working. Fingers people living outside Nigeria but still on FG's payroll, says affected persons to refund illegally earned wages to government coffers. Details can be found on page 6. 15 states to witness flooding, warns federal government. NDLEA bus snake-guarded shrine used to store illicit drugs, arrest 2 in Edo, nabbed 76-year-old grandfather in Abuja. Gunmen kidnap monarchs, orderly drivers in Rivers. You can find details on page 4. On recapitalization, sector slam fine on non-compliant financial institution. Reps right Tinubu seeks Nnamdi Kanu's release. Federal government to construct 2,000 more renewed hope cities, estates in 8 states. You can find details on page 26. Fire God's Christ Embassy Church headquarters in Lagos. Details can be found on page 4. And then we have a picture showing billow of smoke as Fire God's Christ Embassy headquarters, Oregun, Lagos. This happened yesterday. Still on the paper, NLC kicks against decentralization of minimum wage negotiation. And cholera outbreak, avoid kunu, zobo, furada nono, others, says minister. These are all food that are not processed, they are not cooked, they are raw in every form. You don't know the source of the water. So I think that this truly is an advice that you don't even need to wait for the ministry to tell you, but on your own, you should watch out. More details can be found on page 7, and that's all the news on Daily Sun newspaper.
On the Guardian newspaper, the big story, CBN stress test FX bank reform stop BDC funding, with some key points here saying the Apex Bank treats quick fix for long-term confidence building. And we have lack of clarity in the new guidelines fueling fresh panic. Naira on edge ahead of the summer activities. Moody saying government to spend 36% revenue on interest. And concerning the MPC, commit to 21.4% long-term inflation target. So you can read more detail of that on page 6. On cholera, APC chief tail warns governors against diversion of the 260 billion naira PHC fund. You can find detail of that on page 4. NIPSS announces new CEO AfriGo Pay COO. Bandits kill ex-general, 7 others in FCT and in Castina. You can find detail of that on page 9. And we have the Algo Nuge Bika over police occupation of Rivers Council Secretariat, which you can find on page 8. Bago NACON differ on poor handling of the 2024 Hajj and deaths of pilgrims. Price of rice soar by over 180% in 12-month, beans hit 219%. So you can actually take a closer look and see the prices of goods as they are presently. We have custom queries NAFDAC over unregistered drugs. You can find detail of that on page 5. The forced over return to old national anthem is an editorial you can find on page 16. And then National Assembly under pressure on the new minimum wage law and complex, detail found on page 6. LP insists on Obi as the 2027 presidential candidate. You can find more detail of that on page 4. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, Kano government serves Bayero eviction notice from Nasarawa Palace. Governor raises dust over spending of 90 billion naira on Hajj subsidy. INEC retains placeholder as Apata running mate in Edo. Why ABAD remains top in varsity rating by Afe Babalola. You can find details on page 6. Why Oyo government delayed approval of Alekule Hill's choices as 43rd Olubadan. You can find details on page 30. Solid Minerals boost foreign reserves by $5 million. This is a report from Minister of Solid Minerals Alake. Minister presents gold bar to President. The big story on the paper, IOC's frustrating rollout of petrol, says Dangote refinery. Firm accuses government agency of aiding indiscriminate importation. Rivers Council workers plan protest over police presence. You can find details on page 4. State airports, how viable. You can find details on page 2. And that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Punch newspaper. Cholera outbreak, 22 state gets kit as Lagos cases hit 500, data found on page 2. Nigerians borrow 3.9 trillion naira as economic crisis bites harder. Food price hike worry operators amid the 1.2 trillion naira agri-budget, data found on page 31. NNPC shifts $700 million gas pipeline delivery date to August. And the big story is on crude price hike. Dangote alleges IOC frustrating refinery. With the rider, Dangote accuses the NMDPRE of granting license to operators to import dirty fuel. Downside of the paper, federal government to punish supervisors approving salary for JAPA workers. And on Christ Embassy, Lagos Mall demolition, Oyakilomi promises a bigger church. Naira sales at 1,485 naira to a dollar at the official forex market records $23 billion. More detail found in the paper, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, the big story, how corruption added 15% cost to food, bulk products importation. This is a report. You can find details on page 7. Why banks' huge profits outpace GDP growth in same economy, and analysis that you can find details on page 6. 50 federal lawmakers write Tinubu 6 Kanu's release warned invocation of Section 174. FAAN begins raid of touts across airports today. Dangote accuses IOCs of planning to frustrate refinery. No confirmed case of cholera in Osun. This is coming from the government of the state. Retired Army General killed in Abuja. CP orders probe. ASUP kicks as federal government releases new scheme of service for HND holders. Details can be found on page 11. 121.67 trillion naira public debt. Serap asks inspection panel to hold World Bank to account. Details can be found on page 30. Lagos to subject Christ Embassy building to material testing aftermath of fire outbreak. NDLEA bus snake-guarded shrine used to store illicit drugs, arrests two in Edo, naps 76-year-old grandfather in Abuja. Tinubu orders sanctions on civil servants drawing salaries after relocating abroad. Details can be found on page 3, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Vanguard newspaper, we have art icon reminisce about good old Nigeria. With the picture story here, we're seeing textile industry faces total collapse as revival effort fail. We're seeing the writer here saying sector's GDP contribution in steady decline. 96.5% of textile production in Nigerian market imported. Market flooded with fake fabric from China. Enforced Executive Order 003, and then we're having Manufacturer Association of Nigeria and Labour is telling the government. Federal government unveils $3.5 billion revamp plan to create 20,000 jobs, and I hope that they will do something about the textile industry. It's really, really an industry that needs to be revamped again. Still on Vanguard newspaper, Dangote accuses IOC of plotting failure of its refinery. Nigerian pilgrims starving in Saudi Arabia coming from Governor Bago. Worshippers recount ordeal as fire god Christ Embassy headquarters. And labor to governors on minimum wage rescue Nigeria from state of resentment and misery. Civil servants collecting salaries after relocating abroad must refund the money coming from the federal government. And we have other column of stories on the downside of the paper on appointments and as well as sport, and another column for Owe Like Affair. You can find more detail of that in the paper, and that's all on Vanguard newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, ACF hails Tinubu's commitment to AKK gas pipeline project. Federal government issues flood alert to 15 states. NNPC Limited set to deliver gas revolution with OB3 gas pipeline project. Under 17 Women's World Cup, Nigeria to face Dominican Republic, Ecuador, New Zealand in Group A. Details can be found on page 33. The big story: commercial gold boosts Nigeria's foreign reserves by $5 million US, injects 6 billion naira into economy. Alake presents gold bars to Tinubu, where we can see the picture story showing that. Idris chairs unveiling of Isekwene's book Wednesday. You can find details on the front page and continue on page 8. Release Nnamdi Kanu to achieve national healing, 50 reps beg Tinubu. IHR commends Kaduna Agency for refunding $50 to pilgrims. Details can be found on page 9. 100% of SIM cards used in Nigeria locally manufactured, a report from NCC. Group hails Water Resources Ministry on outstanding performance. Kano Court ruling of ownership tussle unambiguous. This is a statement from Coalition. You can find details on page 9, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
All right, on Leadership newspaper, bandit displays 600 villagers seize farmlands in Nigeria. Dangote accuses IOC of plotting refinery failure, and on fact check, we see who is APC blaming for Rivers crisis. And trending food price hike worsen poverty level, but stories can be found on page 4. Idris unveiled writing for media and monetizing it on Wednesday, which we can see the VP Shetima expected as under Isaac host Amuka Yusuf, Oloru Yomi, and other icons will be present. Detail found on page 10. Northern Elders launch 2025 timeline for gas pipeline project. The big story: cost of living. We have the CSO expert demand pay rise for soldiers. National Assembly may intervene, says the Senate spokesperson. Federal government already working on it, coming from the defense headquarters. And here we're seeing salaries of some soldiers from 52,000 to 57,000. And then soldiers are forced into corruption, soldiers engage in trade to survive, soldiers forced into exploitation. And this is a call that we need to take care of our armies. So we do well to hope that the federal government will look into their well-being, their welfare, and take good care of them. Bandit killed 7 persons in Castina, data found on page 22. And on 2027, no plan to dump OB, LP declares. Alake present goal to Tinubu, says reform will boost the economy. And then varsities and others still on IPPIS, says ASU. You can find that on page 10, and that's all on the leadership newspaper.
On the Abuja Inquiry newspaper, starting with the big story, Abuja mothers leave residents in panic. Army General journalist DJ orders victim. Police assures of all-round security. On food crisis, Abuja residents demand urgent government action. Food inflation rises by 2.59% in FCT. Zuba traders accuse council of plot to illegally revoke shop allocations. FEMD issues flood alert in Gishiri and Jahi. You can find details on page 7. NUC accredits 26 academic programs in Uni Abuja. Details can be found on page 10. Tinubu's orders sanction of civil servants taking salaries after relocating abroad. Keyamo unveils plan to tackle begging at nation's airport. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 2, and that's all the news on the Abuja Inquirer.
On national economy newspaper, Nigeria secures $3.5 billion deal with Afrexim Bank for textile and CNG vehicles. Data found on page 5. Federal government seek extension for World Bank $800 million palliative loan. And the big story on minimum wage, labor's 250,000 naira demand unsettles federal government, state and private sector. Fiscal realities will make demand unrealistic, coming from experts. And we're seeing climate change challenges and Nigerians push to develop hydroelectricity. More detail found on page 19. We have column for currency, buying, selling, the inflation rate, and then as well as commodity prices at the end of the market on the 21st of June. So you can do well to read more detail of that, and that's all on National Economy newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, the big story, winners and losers. Rangers crowned NPFL champions, Sporting relegated. You have Mbaoma beat Alimi to golden boots. You can find details on page 6. Brumel wins 4th African title. Omorodion not keen on Chelsea move. Under 17 World Cup, Flamingos face host in Group A. Croatia versus Italy. Azzurri Veterani seek last 16 spot, and Cole urges Southgate to drop Saka. And we have Fulkrug Equalizer seals top spot for host, where we have Switzerland drawing with Germany 1-1. Jovi proposed Greenwood Chelsea swap deal. Details can be found on page 4. Liverpool contact Rabiot. Details can be found on page 5. Devils prepare new Brentwaite bid. Details can be found on page 5. Williams chase may affect Arsenal. I don't want my son to box. A statement from Anthony Joshua. Rivers Angels Niger rattles for Women's Fed Cup final. Kimmich to leave Bayern. Details can be found on page 2, and that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
Well, that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Richard, for doing this.
You're welcome, Sally.
Thank you to the crew and every other person that made this program a success. Until we come your way again, please do have a great day ahead.